Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are focusing on a story that, well, it really defines the tension between the environment, law, and development. It's a crisis unfolding right now concerning the Aravalli mountain range.
And it's not just any collection of hills. Geologically speaking, we're talking about a 2-billion-year-old defense system.
A defense system, right?
Exactly. When we talk about the Aravallis, we're talking about what scientists often call the green lungs of northwestern India. It's an essential shield for huge urban centers like Delhi, Gurugram, and Jaipur.
But that shield has been compromised. And not by, gradual erosion, but by the stroke of a pen. Our deep dive today uses a single, very charged public debate as our source, a debate that was triggered by a really seismic legal shift.
A Supreme Court order that technically redefined what an Aravalli Hill actually is.
So that's our mission today. We want to move past the political shouting matches and really understand the facts here.
The contradictions. What does this technical change mean? How does it stack up against the Indian government's own environmental reports?
And maybe most importantly, what are the immediate consequences for North India's, well, its chronic air quality crisis?
Okay, let's unpack it.
The core tension is between this new, very specific legal measurement and the documented dire need to protect this landscape.
And we have to start with that technical detail because really it's the pivot point for everything else that follows.
So the legal mechanism is, on the surface, very simple, but its effects are devastating.
What is it exactly?
The Supreme Court order rules that only land rising 100 meters or more from the base will be legally recognized as an Aravalli Hill.
100 meters.
And thus be given statutory protection.
It sounds so precise, almost scientific.
Yeah.
But critics immediately labeled this and this is their term, a technical ruse.
The ruse.
It's fascinating, how a seemingly neutral measurement can have such catastrophic and what some say are pre-calculated consequences when you apply it to ancient geology.
Let's zero in on those consequences.
Yeah.
Because the 100-meter threshold is where this whole thing goes from legal theory to, well, environmental disaster.
When you apply that one rule across the entire range, the fallout statistics are just brutal. Out of the vast area that was previously protected, a staggering 91.3% of the range is stripped of its protection.
91.3, so almost 92%.
Overnight.
That's not trimming the hedges. That's ripping out the foundation.
It is. Only a tiny 8.7% survives that definition cut. We're talking about a 2-billion-year-old mountain range, the main protective buffer for northern India, losing 9/10 of its legal status.
Just because the smaller foothills don't meet an arbitrary height requirement.
Exactly.
So what's the function of those smaller hills, the ones that are now unprotected? Because, you think of mountains as just the big peaks. Why does losing the smaller parts matter so much?
Well, geologically, the Aravallis aren't just a few isolated peaks. They're an interlocking system, kind of like a sieve. The smaller hills, the ones that are maybe 50 or 75 meters high, they provide continuity. They act like a net.
And when you remove 91% of that net,
you create huge open gaps, what environmentalists are calling dust corridors.
Right. So the practical, immediate effect of this so-called technical ruse is terrifying. Those newly unprotected areas are instantly opened up for large-scale development.
Which means real estate and mining interests can just rush in.
And the fear is that unregulated mining will resume in all those areas below the 100-meter line. The dust corridors reopen, and that leads us straight into the AQI crisis.
And this is where the story gets really compelling. Because this drastic legal change, it seems to directly contradict the government's own stated priorities from just a few months earlier.
The timeline is, it's impossible to ignore. This Supreme Court ruling happened in December. But if you rewind just 8 months, back to May of 2025, you find the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change, the MOEFCC, published a huge report on this exact landscape.
And that report, it's called the Detailed Action Plan, Aravalli Landscape Restoration. It's not some obscure paper, it's an official government document. And it provides clear, irrefutable evidence of the range's critical status. The Union Environment Minister himself wrote the foreword.
And what did he say?
He explicitly referred to the Aravallis as the green lungs of northwestern India.
That's the government's highest environmental office admitting how vital this region is.
Absolutely. And it gets more specific. The executive summary of that same report, it's on page 6, explicitly states the Aravallis serve as a natural barrier preventing the expansion of the Thar Desert.
So they admit it protects cities like Delhi, Jaipur, and Gurugram.
They confirm it.
So the conflict is glaring.
Right.
The critics in this debate are asking a really fundamental question. How can the government allow or even endorse in court the dilution of this definition?
When their own documents say it will widen 12 gaps in the Aravallis, enabling desert sands to move forward.
They're essentially contradicting their own science.
And that report is also a shocking admission of past failure. It reveals that 31 out of 128 hills in Rajasthan have already, well, they've vanished completely.
Not just degraded, gone.
Gone. Because of unchecked activities, it just provides context for the urgency.
And they even put a price tag on their commitment. The ministry had set aside a staggering 1,653 crores.
Over 16 billion rupees.
For the restoration of over 8 lakh hectares.
A huge investment. But here's the problem critics raised. If 90% of the area that needs that restoration has just lost its legal status as an Aravalli hill.
Where is that 1,600 crores going to go?
Exactly. If the land isn't legally a resource worth protecting anymore, the entire funding mechanism, the whole mission, it just seems fundamentally flawed.
And we have to connect this to the bigger crisis in North India, the AQI.
The life or death crisis.
Right. The Aravalli destruction links directly to that smog, the particulate matter that just brings life to a standstill every winter.
We're talking about AQI levels consistently crossing 700, 800 in the capital region.
Environmentalists in the debate made this truly terrifying, almost absolute statement. They said if 90% of the Aravallis vanish, quote, AQI in Delhi NCR is over. Now, that sounds incredibly dramatic. Is that an exaggeration, or is there real science backing that up?
It is dramatic, but the science supports the scale of the crisis. It's not just about losing the filter, you're losing the windbreak. The disappearance of that 91%, especially those continuous foothills, means those dust corridors just reopen.
And the dust comes from?
And it's a combination. The natural movement of sand from the Thar Desert, plus all the man-made dust from construction and, of course, mining. The system that filters and slows that air movement just collapses.
And the damage goes way beyond the air we breathe.
Oh, absolutely. The ecological devastation is already here. Mining has profoundly damaged the hydrological system.
Meaning the water.
Aquifers, the underground water reserves, they've been depleted. Lakes have completely dried up, and the pollution of local rivers is severe. Take the Jijan River. Stone crushing units nearby have dumped so much waste that there are high levels of ammonia and toxic metals in the water.
And this isn't some abstract chemical problem. It hits people's daily lives immediately.
It does. It affects rural communities directly, it hits their drinking water, and it severely disrupts agriculture, specifically the kharif production.
The monsoon crop cycle.
Which is essential for regional food security. And look, beyond water and dirt, the Aravalli Range is a recognized biodiversity hotspot.
Right.
Over 300 plant species, 120 bird species, 15 mammal species. One geologist even warned that this destruction could have far-reaching effects like no rain in the sub-Himalayan region later.
So this is a regional climate disaster waiting to happen.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, in defense of this new order, you often hear proponents talk about sustainable mining, but that raises a big question. Can you sustainably mine a geological feature that is performing an irreplaceable ecological function, like holding back a massive desert?
The environmental counterargument was extremely sharp on this.
What did they say?
They argued that sustainable mining, especially when 90% of the range just lost protection, is an inherent contradiction. When you change the legal definition to open up a resource for commercial use, the word sustainable is, well, it's arguably meaningless.
So you have to ask about the motivation. Why this technical shift that just flies in the face of scientific consensus, even the government's own reports? Critics argued that this exemplifies a specific governance failure they call collusional corruption.
What does that mean exactly? Collusional corruption. It sounds more calculated than just a simple bribe.
It is. The idea is that the political entity doesn't break the existing law. Instead, they change the law.
Or in this case, change the legal definition.
Exactly. To specifically benefit big business interests, it's using legal tools to enable what used to be illegal.
And the immediate beneficiaries here?
Real estate and mining. They can now access land that was off limits because, legally, it was a hill.
And this view was reinforced by reports that the environment minister had met with CREDI.
The Real Estate Developers Association.
Yes. That definitely added fuel to the fire, with critics suggesting the whole thing is a cynical plan to, quote, loot and run away before the long-term disaster strikes.
And this skepticism about sustainable mining under the new rule, it's just compounded by what's already happening on the ground?
The implementation failures.
Exactly. Reporters covering the debate cited what's happening in Kaputli, Rajasthan. They allegedly captured illegal mining happening openly at night in pitch darkness.
And that's despite orders from the Director General of Mine Safety forbidding mining after sunset.
It's a powerful point.
It is. If regulatory bodies can't even enforce the strict laws that already exist, why should anyone believe they'll properly monitor sustainable mining under a diluted definition that's opened up 91% of the land?
The legal dilution is basically being seen as an invitation for destruction.
And this all comes back to the political calculus. What does it mean for the people affected?
Well, the debate highlighted this infuriating reality that while the political class spent time pushing through highly polarized internal issues, like passing the Wakefil at 4 in the morning,
Right.
they did not spend one single minute discussing the collapsing air quality and the Aravalli crisis, even though 25 to 30 crore people are directly affected.
It's just a complete misalignment of priorities. They're prioritizing legislative maneuvers over the critical environmental infrastructure of the entire region. This has been a heavy dive, charting the consequences of a simple technical legal change. The facts we've drawn from our sources are just stark. 91.3% of an essential 2 billion-year-old ecological resource is being stripped of protection.
And it directly contradicts the government's own scientific reports warning about desertification and air stability.
The debate really boiled down to the difference between mitigation and preservation. And this is a crucial distinction for you to consider.
One spokesperson argued they were compensating for the loss of the Aravalis by investing in things like Miyawaki forests in Delhi.
Right, planting a lot of dense trees in small urban pockets.
Precisely. It's mitigation. But the environmental counterargument was so powerful and concise. You can make a forest, you can't make a mountain.
You can't make a mountain.
Preserving that geological structure that slows the wind, collects water, and halts the desert, that is an irreplaceable function. You can't just compensate for it by planting a few trees somewhere else.
Which brings us to our final thought for you to mull over. A geologist in the source material offered this analogy for just how arbitrary the new definition is. Defining the Aravalis this narrowly, by only counting peaks over 100 meters, is like defining a journalist only as someone who is below 6 feet.
It raises that essential question for all of us. When does a technical definition stop being a scientific classification and become instead a purely legal excuse for irreversible destruction? The fate of the Aravalis now really rests on public pressure, and the hope that political leaders recognize the gravity of this and intervene to reverse this definition before the desert literally moves in.